What would you do if you discovered the horse no one wanted held a secret that could change everything? When young Ethan rescued a frail, forgotten stallion named Thunder, he thought he was simply giving the animal a second chance at life. But he couldn't have imagined the storm of danger and intrigue that would follow. As Ethan and Thunder formed an unshakable bond, dark truths about Thunder's past began to surface, truths tied to a corrupt legacy of greed, cruelty, and betrayal. With powerful enemies closing in, Ethan faced impossible choices: protect his beloved horse, uncover the truth, and confront a ruthless man determined to bury the past at any cost. Through courage, determination, and the support of unlikely allies, Ethan found himself in the fight of his life, not just for Thunder, but for justice. The dusty air of the auction ground clung to Ethan's skin as he clutched a handful of crumpled dollar bills. At 12 years old, he had no business bidding on anything, let alone a horse. Yet when the skeletal figure of Thunder stumbled into the ring, something inside him sparked. Ethan wasn't sure why, but he felt an inexplicable connection to the horse. It wasn't the disdainful murmurs of the crowd that fueled his determination. It was Thunder's eyes. Beneath the exhaustion and neglect, they radiated a faint but undeniable will to survive. $20, Ethan called out, his voice trembling. The crowd erupted into whispers and chuckles. That horse won't even make it through the week, someone scoffed. Ethan ignored them. 25, he countered, clenching his fists. The auctioneer's gavel came down. Thunder was his. Leading the horse home wasn't the triumphant moment Ethan had imagined. Thunder limped behind him, ribs jutting out painfully, his coat patchy and dull. Ethan's mother, Maria, met him at the paddock with crossed arms and a deep frown. "Ethan, this isn't what we discussed. We can barely afford to keep the farm running," she said, her tone sharp but tinged with worry. "I'll take care of him," Ethan promised, stroking Thunder's neck gently. "He's not just any horse, Mom. I can feel it." That night, Ethan stayed up reading old books on horse care by candlelight. His neighbor, Mr. Carter, an enigmatic man with a weathered face and a cane, offered help the next morning. "This horse has been through a lot," Carter said, inspecting Thunder's legs. "But sometimes the ones with scars have the most to give." With Carter's guidance, Ethan prepared special feed and nursed Thunder with unwavering dedication. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan began to see progress. Thunder's appetite returned, his coat regained its shine, and his spirit seemed to flicker back to life. One afternoon, Carter leaned on the fence, watching Ethan practice groundwork with Thunder. "You've got the touch, boy," he said with a rare smile. "But don't let that fool you. A horse like this, there's more to his story than meets the eye." Ethan brushed off the comment, chalking it up to Carter's cryptic nature. Yet, he couldn't ignore the sense that Thunder's past held secrets he wasn't ready to face. As Ethan led Thunder back to the barn, a black truck rolled up the driveway, its polished exterior gleaming under the setting sun. A tall man in a sharp suit stepped out, his piercing gaze fixed on Thunder. "Good evening," he said, tipping his wide-brimmed hat. "I'm Mr. Harper. I hear you've got quite the special horse there. Mind if we talk?" Ethan's gut twisted with unease, but he nodded. "Sure. What's this about?" Harper's smile was charming but cold. "Let's just say Thunder has a history, a valuable one, and I'm here to make you an offer you can't refuse." Ethan's grip on the lead rope tightened. He had no idea what Harper was talking about, but he knew one thing for certain: Thunder wasn't for sale. Ethan's heart thudded as Harper's sharp gaze moved from Thunder to him. Something about the man's presence was unnerving, like a predator sizing up its prey. Ethan instinctively stepped closer to Thunder, shielding the horse as though Harper might snatch him away right there. "I appreciate the interest, Mr. Harper," Ethan said cautiously, "but Thunder isn't for sale." Harper's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. "You might want to reconsider, son. A horse like that, it's a shame to keep him here, wasting potential. Ethan squared his shoulders, his voice firm, despite the knot of nerves in his stomach. He's not wasting anything. He's part of my family now. Harper chuckled, low and humorless. Suit yourself. He turned, gesturing for his associates to follow, but paused as he reached the truck. Just remember, not everyone will agree with your decision. As the truck rumbled down the dirt road, Ethan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The encounter left a sour taste in his mouth, but he pushed it aside, focusing on Thunder. "You're not going anywhere," he whispered, patting Thunder's neck. The horse nuzzled him gently, as if to say he understood. That evening, Ethan replayed the conversation with Harper in his mind. What did he mean about Thunder having a history? As he brushed Thunder's coat, he noticed something unusual, a faint brand on Thunder's flank, almost obscured by his now glossy coat. Ethan ran his fingers over the mark, a strange combination of letters and numbers. "What's this, buddy?" he murmured. Thunder twitched, but didn't move away. The next morning, Ethan showed the brand to Mr. Carter. The older man's face darkened as he examined it. "This isn't just any brand, Ethan," Carter said gravely. "This horse belonged to the Redwood Stables, a top racing stable that's been out of business for years." Ethan's jaw dropped. "Racing? Thunder! But he was practically skin and bones when I got him." Carter nodded, leaning on his cane. "Redwood was infamous for pushing their horses too hard. If a horse couldn't keep up, they were discarded. Thunder must have been one of the unlucky ones." The revelation hit Ethan like a tidal wave. Thunder had once been a prized racehorse, only to be thrown away like garbage. The thought of someone treating him like that made Ethan's blood boil. But it also explained Harper's interest. A horse with Thunder's pedigree could still be valuable to the right people. As the days passed, Ethan threw himself into training Thunder. Their bond grew stronger with each passing moment. Thunder's movements became more fluid, his confidence shining through. Ethan began to believe that Thunder's best days weren't behind him, they were still ahead. But trouble wasn't far away. One evening, Ethan noticed tire tracks near the paddock, the grooves fresh in the mud. He felt a chill creep down his spine. Someone had been here. He doubled down on securing the farm, repairing the paddock gate, and setting up motion-activated lights with his mother's help. But the unease lingered. Harper's warning echoed in his mind. "Not everyone will agree with your decision." Then, late one night, Ethan woke to the sound of Thunder's frantic whinnies. He bolted out of bed and rushed outside. Flames danced along the edges of the paddock, smoke thick in the air. "Thunder!" Ethan shouted, his heart pounding as he grabbed a bucket of water and a wet blanket. The fire wasn't spreading too fast yet, but Thunder was panicked, kicking at the gate. "It's okay, boy. I'm here," Ethan called, throwing the blanket over Thunder's back. The horse stilled just long enough for Ethan to unlatch the gate and lead him to safety. When the fire was finally extinguished, Ethan combed through the ashes of the paddock. Something glinted faintly in the debris. He bent down and picked up a silver lighter, its surface engraved with a familiar logo, Redwood Stables. Ethan's hands trembled as he turned the lighter over. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted Thunder gone, and now Ethan was determined to find out why. The silver lighter felt heavy in Ethan's palm as the realization hit him. Someone from Thunder's past was trying to erase him completely. Redwood Stables wasn't just a name from Thunder's history, it was a threat that lingered in the present. Ethan tucked the lighter into his pocket and scanned the scorched paddock. His mother approached, her face pale with worry. "Ethan, are you sure you're okay? What happened out here?" "It wasn't an accident, Mom," Ethan said quietly, holding up the lighter. "Whoever started this left their calling card." Maria's brow furrowed as she examined the engraving. "Redwood Stables? I thought they shut down years ago." "Apparently, someone hasn't let go of the past," Ethan replied. "But why go this far just for Thunder?" Maria hesitated. "I don't know, Ethan. But whoever did this could come back. We need to protect ourselves and Thunder. Determined, Ethan reinforced the paddock with sturdier materials, adding locks to the gates and installing a motion-activated camera. He wouldn't let anyone harm Thunder again. As the days passed, Ethan noticed Thunder acting differently. The once confident stallion seemed restless, often pacing the paddock at night. Carter noticed it too. "Something's eating at him," Carter said one afternoon, watching Thunder paw at the ground. "Horses don't forget trauma, Ethan. Whatever happened to him at Redwood, it's still with him." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He needed answers. The brand on Thunder's flank was the only tangible link to Redwood, and he intended to follow it. The next weekend, Ethan and Carter made a trip to the county archives. After hours of sifting through dusty records, they found an article about Redwood's closure. The headline read, "Redwood Stables Scandal. Abuse Allegations Lead to Shutdown." Ethan skimmed the article, his stomach churning. The report detailed how the stable had been accused of overworking its horses to the point of injury. Thunder's name wasn't mentioned, but Ethan had no doubt he had been one of the victims. "That's why they want him gone," Carter murmured. "He's proofs of what they did, and if someone with influence finds out he's still alive, they could be exposed," Ethan finished. Later that night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by the paddock, watching Thunder graze under the moonlight. He thought about the fire, the lighter, and Harper's cryptic words. "What did they do to you, boy?" Ethan whispered. Thunder turned his head, his eyes reflecting the moonlight, and for a moment, Ethan felt the weight of the horse's pain. The following day, Ethan decided it was time to take Thunder's training to the next level. He brought out his father's old saddle, the one that had sat unused in the barn since his dad's passing. "This was Dad's," Ethan said, running his hand over the worn leather. "He'd want us to use it." To his surprise, Thunder didn't flinch as Ethan placed the saddle on his back. The horse stood steady, as if he understood the significance. Carter watched from the fence. "You've got something special here, Ethan, but don't rush it. A bond like this takes time." Ethan nodded. "I'm not giving up on him, no matter what." But trouble wasn't far away. That evening, Ethan returned from town to find the motion camera blinking red, a sign that it had captured something. He played back the footage and froze. The screen showed two shadowy figures near the paddock, one of them holding a bolt cutter. Before they could act, the motion lights activated, sending them fleeing into the darkness. Ethan's heart raced. This wasn't just about Thunder's past anymore. It was about his future. Grabbing the lighter, Ethan stared at the Redwood logo and made a vow. "You're not getting away with this." What he didn't know was that the people coming after Thunder weren't just interested in silencing a scandal, they had their own secrets to protect. And Ethan was about to uncover them all. Ethan couldn't shake the image of the shadowy figures from the camera footage. They were getting bolder, and he knew that waiting for them to strike again wasn't an option. If he wanted to protect Thunder, he needed to take the fight to them. Armed with the lighter bearing the Redwood Stables logo, Ethan decided to dig deeper. Early the next morning, he and Mr. Carter set out for the remains of Redwood Stables, a property that had been abandoned for years. "You sure about this, kid?" Carter asked, leaning on his cane as they stood before the rusted gates of the once prestigious stables. The buildings loomed like ghosts, their peeling paint and shattered windows a testament to years of neglect. "I need to know what we're dealing with," Ethan said, determination etched on his face. The gates creaked as they pushed them open, revealing a desolate courtyard. Broken fences and toppled barrels littered the grounds. The air felt heavy, as though the place still carried the weight of the horses' suffering. Ethan spotted a crumbling office at the far end of the property. "Let's start there," he said, leading the way. Inside, the office was a chaotic mess of overturned desks and scattered papers. Most of the documents were faded and unreadable, but in a locked drawer, Carter found a hidden folder. "This looks like trouble," Carter muttered, flipping through the papers. The folder contained a ledger with detailed records of the stable's operations. Ethan scanned the pages until he found something that made his blood run cold. Thunder's name. Storm Chaser, Ethan read aloud, realizing it was Thunder's original name. The ledger detailed Thunder's races, injuries, and the decision to discard him after a leg injury that was deemed irrecoverable. They threw him away like he was nothing, Ethan said, anger boiling in his chest. But another name in the ledger caught Carter's attention. Daniel Harper. Harper? Ethan asked, his heart racing. Carter nodded grimly. Looks like he wasn't just interested in Thunder. He was part of this place, maybe even one of the people running it. Ethan's hands trembled as he closed the folder. Harper hadn't just been trying to buy Thunder, he was covering his tracks. As they left the office, the sound of crunching gravel made them freeze. Someone else was there. "Stay quiet," Carter whispered, pulling Ethan behind a stack of crates. Two men entered the courtyard, their voices low but urgent. One of them was Harper. "We've got to get rid of the evidence," Harper said, glancing toward the office. "If anyone connects us to this place, we're done." Ethan's pulse quickened as he realized the stakes. Harper wasn't just a businessman. He was the mastermind behind Redwood's abusive practices. And now, he was determined to destroy any trace of his involvement. Carter gripped Ethan's shoulder. "We need to go, now." Quietly, they slipped out the back gate and made their way to Carter's truck. As they drove away, Ethan's mind raced. "He's not stopping," Ethan said. "As long as Thunder's alive, Harper has something to lose." "That's why we've got to be smarter," Carter replied. "We've got the ledger now, but it's not enough. We need to make sure the right people see it." Back at the farm, Ethan hid the ledger in a secure spot, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Harper's reach was longer than he had imagined. That night, Ethan sat by the paddock, watching Thunder graze under the stars. "We're not just fighting for you anymore, boy," he said softly. "We're fighting for all the horses they hurt, and I won't let them win." But as the wind rustled the trees, Ethan couldn't help but feel the storm brewing. Harper wasn't going to back down, and neither was he. Ethan woke to a feeling of unease that hadn't left him since their visit to Redwood Stables. Harper knew they were getting close to the truth, and the knowledge weighed heavy on Ethan. As he stepped out to check on Thunder, the sight of the horse waiting at the gate calmed him slightly. "Morning, boy," Ethan said, stroking Thunder's neck. "We've got a lot to figure out." The ledger was their ace, but exposing Harper wasn't going to be easy. His connections and influence could bury the evidence or worse, turn the tables on Ethan and Carter. Later that day, Carter showed up at the farm, his expression grave. "We've got trouble," he said without preamble. Ethan tensed. "What is it?" "Harper's been asking questions around town," Carter said. "He knows we've got something on him. I overheard one of his men saying they'd take care of it before the week's out." Ethan's fists clenched. "He won't stop, will he?" "No," Carter said, "but we've got one shot to stop him first." Together, they devised a plan. Carter suggested reaching out to the local sheriff, an old friend of his, who might be willing to look into the case. But before they could act, Harper made his next move. That evening, as Ethan walked Thunder around the paddock, the distant growl of engines broke the quiet. Two black trucks rumbled up the driveway, their headlights cutting through the fading light. Ethan's heart sank as Harper and three men stepped out. "Evening, Ethan," Harper called, his voice smooth but cold. "What do you want?" Ethan asked, stepping protectively in front of Thunder. Harper's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just tying up loose ends. Hand over the ledger, and we'll forget all about this little misunderstanding." Ethan didn't flinch. "I don't have it." Harper's face darkened. "Don't lie to me, kid. You don't want to make this harder than it needs to be." Ethan's mother appeared on the porch, her face tight with worry. "You need to leave," she said firmly. "This is private property." Harper ignored her, his gaze fixed on Ethan. "Last chance, boy." Ethan's voice trembled, but his resolve didn't waver. "You're not getting the ledger, and you're not getting Thunder." Harper's men stepped forward, but before they could act, Carter's truck roared up the driveway. The older man jumped out, wielding his cane like a weapon. "You boys better think twice," Carter warned. "The sheriff's already been tipped off. He'll be here any minute." Harper hesitated, his men exchanging uneasy glances. After a tense moment, Harper smirked and stepped back. "This isn't over," he said, climbing into his truck. "You've made yourself a very dangerous enemy, Ethan." As the trucks disappeared into the night, Ethan's knees buckled with relief. Carter helped steady him. "You okay, kid?" Ethan nodded, though his hands shook. "We have to finish this. He's not going to stop until we're out of the way." The next morning, they met with the sheriff and handed over the ledger. While the sheriff promised to investigate, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Harper had more tricks up his sleeve. Sure enough, that night, the motion camera caught more activity. Ethan reviewed the footage and froze. The men hadn't come for Thunder this time, they'd left something. Ethan and Carter rushed out to find a charred piece of wood nailed to the barn door. The word, "Run," scrawled across it in blackened soot. Ethan's stomach churned. This wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration of war. "We're not running," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "Thunder and I have come too far to back down now." Carter placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Then we fight smart. Harper's used to winning, but he's never faced someone with your determination." Ethan looked out at Thunder, who stood tall despite the tension in the air. "We're not just fighting for us," he said. "We're fighting for every horse he's ever hurt, and we're not stopping until the truth comes out." The storm had truly broken, and there was no turning back. The chilling message on the barn door lingered in Ethan's mind as he lay awake that night. The fight with Harper had escalated, and Ethan knew the stakes were higher than ever. He wasn't just protecting Thunder anymore. He was exposing a legacy of cruelty. The next morning, Ethan and Carter met with the sheriff again, presenting the footage from the motion camera. Sheriff Holden, a gruff man with a sharp gaze, examined the evidence carefully. "This isn't just trespassing," Holden said, his voice low. "It's intimidation. But proving Harper's involvement won't be easy. He's got money and lawyers to bury anything we throw at him." "What about the ledger?" Ethan asked. "It proves what he did at Redwood." Holden nodded. "It's a start, but we need more. Something concrete that ties him directly to this." Ethan's frustration grew. How much more did they need? Thunder had been through enough, and now Harper was targeting them at home. As Ethan and Carter left the sheriff's office, they were approached by an unexpected figure, a woman in her early 30s with a no-nonsense demeanor and a camera slung over her shoulder, stepped into their path. "You're Ethan, right?" she asked, her eyes scanning him intently. "Who's asking?" Carter said, stepping protectively between Ethan and the stranger. "Chloe Winters," she said, holding up a press badge. "Freelance journalist. I've been investigating Redwood stables for months, and I think we have the same enemy." Ethan's pulse quickened. "You know about Harper?" Chloe nodded. "I know enough to make him nervous, but I need your help to blow this wide open." Carter crossed his arms. "And why should we trust you?" Chloe met his gaze without flinching. "Because Harper ruined my career. I reported on Redwood's abuse years ago, and he used his influence to discredit me. This is my chance to set the record straight and to get justice for the horses he hurt." Ethan hesitated, but something about Chloe's sincerity convinced him. "What do you need from us?" "Everything you have: footage, the ledger, even Thunder's story," Chloe said. "If we can prove Harper's still trying to cover this up, it'll be more than enough to take him down." Back at the farm, they laid out everything they had. Chloe studied the ledger, nodding as she connected the dots. "This is damning," she said, "but it's not enough to sway public opinion. People need to see Thunder to hear what he's been through." Ethan's stomach tightened. Thunder had come so far, but the idea of putting him in the spotlight made him uneasy. "He's not a show horse," Ethan said. "I don't want him dragged into this." Chloe placed a hand on his shoulder. I get it, but Thunder's survival is the strongest evidence we have. People will listen to you because of him, Carter chimed in. She's right, Ethan. If you want to stop Harper, this might be the only way. Reluctantly, Ethan agreed. They set a plan in motion. Chloe would publish a story exposing Harper's actions, backed by the ledger and footage. The centerpiece of the story would be a live demonstration of Thunder's recovery, showing the world that even a horse discarded by Harper could rise again. As the day of the demonstration approached, Ethan worked tirelessly with Thunder, ensuring he was ready. Chloe filmed everything, capturing not just Thunder's physical transformation, but the bond he shared with Ethan. On the morning of the event, a small crowd gathered at the farm, locals, reporters, and even a few animal welfare advocates. Ethan stood beside Thunder, his heart pounding as he faced the cameras. "This is Thunder," Ethan began, his voice steady despite the nerves. "He was left for dead by people who only cared about winning. But he's more than that. He's proof that second chances matter." Thunder, sensing Ethan's resolve, stood tall, his sleek coat gleaming in the sunlight. The crowd murmured in awe as Ethan led him through a series of graceful maneuvers. But not everyone in the audience was there to cheer. Ethan spotted Harper lurking near the back, his jaw tight and his eyes cold. As the demonstration ended, Chloe approached Ethan. "You were incredible," she said. "This is going to change everything." But Ethan wasn't so sure. Harper wouldn't go down without a fight, and Ethan knew the battle was far from over. Ethan's demonstration with Thunder was met with overwhelming praise. The crowd's awe and the supportive comments from reporters gave Ethan a glimmer of hope. Chloe's story was set to publish the next morning, a detailed expose on Redwood stables and Harper's abusive legacy. But as night fell, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Harper had been there, watching from the shadows. He wasn't the type to let things slide. Around midnight, Ethan was jolted awake by the sound of a loud bang outside. Heart pounding, he grabbed a flashlight and rushed out, Carter following close behind. What they saw made his stomach drop. The barn doors were thrown wide open, and the paddock gate had been torn from its hinges. Thunder was gone. "No!" Ethan shouted, sprinting to the empty paddock. He looked around desperately, calling Thunder's name. The horse's absence was a punch to the gut, but the broken gate made one thing clear. This wasn't an accident. Carter placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "We'll find him, kid. They couldn't have gotten far." Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing. "It's Harper. He's trying to silence us. If he takes Thunder—" "We won't let him," Carter said firmly. They found fresh tire tracks leading away from the farm and quickly followed them in Carter's truck. The tracks wound through back roads and into the woods. As they drove, Ethan's mind churned with anger and fear. Thunder had already endured so much. If Harper took him back, there was no telling what he'd do. The truck came to a stop near an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was a decrepit building, its windows boarded up and the surrounding area overgrown. "This has to be it," Carter muttered, cutting the engine. Ethan jumped out, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The faint sound of hooves stomping reached his ears, and he sprinted toward it. Inside the warehouse, the sight made his blood boil. Thunder was tied to a post, his eyes wide with fear, as Harper and two of his men stood nearby, arguing. "This is a mistake," one of the men said nervously. "The kid's got the whole town on his side now. We should cut our losses." Harper's voice was icy. "We can't afford mistakes. If that story gets out, I'm finished. Thunder is evidence, and evidence doesn't walk away." Ethan's breath hitched. He motioned for Carter to stay back and crept closer, his anger overriding his fear. "Hey!" Ethan's voice echoed in the warehouse. Harper and his men spun around, their faces darkening when they saw him. "Well, well," Harper said, his voice dripping with mockery. "The little hero. You should have stayed in bed, kid." Ethan ignored the taunt, his eyes locked on Thunder. "Let him go. He doesn't belong to you." Harper stepped closer, his expression cold. You think you can stop me? You're just a boy with no idea how the world works. Ethan stood his ground. I know enough to see you for what you are, a coward who hides behind money and power. Thunder deserves better, and I'm not leaving without him. The tension in the room was suffocating. One of Harper's men moved to grab Ethan, but Carter appeared in the doorway, his cane raised like a weapon. Touch him, and you'll regret it, Carter growled. Harper's men hesitated, their resolve faltering. Harper scowled, realizing he was outnumbered. This isn't over, he spat, signaling for his men to back down. Ethan quickly untied Thunder, stroking his neck to calm him. It's okay, boy. We're going home. As they led Thunder out, Harper's parting words echoed in Ethan's ears. You think you've won, but you have no idea what's coming. Back at the farm, Ethan collapsed against Thunder, relief washing over him. But he knew Harper wasn't bluffing. The man wouldn't stop until everything and everyone standing in his way was destroyed. The battle was far from over, and the next strike could be even deadlier. Ethan barely slept after rescuing Thunder from Harper's clutches. The man's parting threat echoed in his mind, leaving him restless and on edge. Thunder was safe for now, but Ethan knew Harper wouldn't stop. He had to act first. The next morning, Chloe arrived at the farm, her face pale with urgency. Ethan, the story's live, she said, holding up her tablet. The headline blared, Redwood Stables Scandal. Local teen uncovers abuse and corruption. The article detailed Harper's connection to the stable's downfall, supported by the ledger, the camera footage, and Thunder's remarkable recovery. Chloe's words painted a damning picture of greed and cruelty, and public reaction was swift. Within hours, the article had spread like wildfire. Social media buzzed with outrage, and local news outlets picked up the story. But the exposure came with a cost. Harper's furious, Chloe warned. I've already gotten 2 threatening voicemails. He's not going to take this lying down. Ethan's stomach churned, but he refused to back down. Let him come. We're not hiding anymore. That resolve was tested sooner than expected. Late that afternoon, a black SUV rolled up to the farm. Ethan and Carter stepped outside, bracing themselves as Harper emerged, flanked by 2 men in suits. Harper's face was a mask of calm fury. You think this little article changes anything? He sneered. You've made a lot of enemies, kid. People who don't like having their names dragged through the mud? Ethan stood firm, his voice steady, despite the fear simmering inside him. You brought this on yourself. If you'd treated those horses with respect, none of this would have happened. Harper stepped closer, lowering his voice to a threatening whisper. You think you're safe? I own half this town. It won't take much to make your life miserable. Carter moved between them, his cane tapping the ground. You've already tried, and failed. Now get off this property before I call the sheriff. Harper hesitated, his sharp eyes flicking to the motion camera mounted on the barn. With a dismissive scoff, he backed away. This isn't over, he said before getting into his SUV and driving off. Chloe, who had recorded the entire exchange from a discreet distance, approached Ethan. That was bold, she said. But we need to be ready for what comes next. What's next? Ethan asked, trying to mask the nervous energy buzzing through him. Chloe frowned. Harper's going to do whatever it takes to control the narrative. He'll try to discredit us, maybe even dig into your family's past to find dirt. The words sent a chill through Ethan. His family had nothing to hide, or so he thought. That night, Ethan found his mother sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an old photo album. He approached quietly. Mom, are you okay? Maria looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of worry and guilt. Ethan, there's something I need to tell you, she said, her voice trembling. What is it? Maria hesitated before opening the album to a faded photograph of a young man standing beside a horse. Ethan recognized the saddle instantly. It was the same one he used with Thunder. That's your father, Maria said softly. And that's Storm Chaser Thunder. Your dad trained him before Redwood got their hands on him. Ethan's jaw dropped. Dad knew Thunder? Maria nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Your father worked at Redwood before he knew how bad things were. When he tried to expose the abuse, they blacklisted him. We moved here to start over, but it's always haunted me that we couldn't save the horses he loved. Ethan's chest tightened as he absorbed the revelation. So that's why you didn't want me getting involved. You were trying to protect me. Maria reached out, her voice cracking. And now Harper's coming after you, just like he did your father. I'm so sorry, Ethan. Ethan swallowed hard, determination hardening in his gut. You don't have to apologize, Mom. This time, we're going to finish what Dad started. As he sat by the paddock later that night, stroking Thunder's mane, Ethan whispered, We've come too far to stop now. This is our fight, and we're going to win it for Dad, for you, and for every horse they hurt. But deep down, Ethan knew the game Harper was playing was only getting more dangerous. The stakes had never been higher, and neither had the risks. Ethan couldn't shake the weight of his mother's revelation. His father had been part of Redwood's story all along, a connection Harper would undoubtedly exploit. But instead of fear, Ethan felt a renewed determination. This fight wasn't just for Thunder anymore. It was for his father's legacy. The morning after Harper's visit, Carter arrived with troubling news. The sheriff's office got a tip about the ledger being fabricated, Carter said, his expression grim. Harper's already pulling strings to make us look like liars. Ethan slammed his fist against the barn wall. He's trying to bury the truth, just like he did before. Chloe stepped forward, her face tight with resolve. We're not letting that happen. If Harper wants to discredit us, we'll make it impossible for him to hide. But we need to act fast. Together, they devised a plan. Chloe would reach out to national news outlets, offering the story to a broader audience while ensuring Redwood's former employees and victims came forward to corroborate the allegations. Meanwhile, Ethan and Carter worked to gather more evidence from Redwood's ruins. This time, they brought a drone to capture aerial footage, hoping to uncover overlooked details. At the site, Ethan piloted the drone over the crumbling property. From above, they spotted something peculiar near the back of the main barn, a collapsed structure partially covering a rusted metal box. What do you think that is? Ethan asked. Only one way to find out, Carter replied, grabbing a crowbar from the truck. It took nearly an hour to dig out the box, but when they opened it, their efforts were rewarded. Inside was a trove of old contracts, payment logs, and handwritten notes, all bearing Harper's signature. One particularly damning note read, Dispose of injured horses immediately, no exceptions. This is it, Ethan said, his voice trembling with a mix of triumph and disgust. This proves Harper was in charge. On their way back to the farm, Ethan couldn't help but feel the walls closing in. Harper would never let this evidence see the light of day without a fight. Sure enough, that evening, another threat arrived in the form of a letter slipped under their door. The message was simple: drop this or you'll regret it. Ethan handed the letter to Sheriff Holden, who agreed to place the farm under increased patrols. But Harper's influence extended far beyond intimidation. By the next morning, Ethan discovered their farm's water supply had been tampered with, leaving their animals at risk. This has to stop, Maria said, her voice trembling as she surveyed the damage. It will, Ethan replied firmly. We're close. He knows it, and that's why he's desperate. With Chloe's help, Ethan decided to confront Harper head-on. They tracked him to a high-profile event at the county fairgrounds, where Harper was schmoozing with local politicians and business leaders. Ethan stormed into the venue, Chloe and Carter at his side. The crowd hushed as Ethan called out, "Harper, you can't hide anymore!" Harper turned, his face a mask of calculated calm. "What's this about, boy?" Ethan stepped forward, holding up one of the incriminating documents. "You lied, cheated, and hurt innocent animals for profit. And now everyone's going to know the truth. Chloe raised her camera, capturing every word as Ethan laid out the evidence they'd uncovered. Harper's facade cracked as murmurs rippled through the crowd. "This is slander," Harper snarled, though his eyes betrayed his panic. "You'll regret this." Ethan met his gaze, unwavering. "The only one with regrets will be you, when you finally face justice." As Harper stormed out, the crowd began to turn against him. Chloe's live stream went viral, spreading the confrontation across social media. Within hours, public outrage reached a boiling point. That night, as Ethan returned to the farm, he felt the weight of the fight lifting. For the first time, it seemed like victory was within reach. But as he stood in the paddock, stroking Thunder's mane, he couldn't ignore the feeling that Harper still had one final card to play, and it might cost more than they were prepared to lose. The farm was eerily quiet the night after Ethan's public confrontation with Harper. Though the video of their clash had gone viral, drawing widespread support, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. Harper was cornered, and cornered men were the most dangerous. Carter stayed at the farm that night, insisting they stay vigilant. Chloe worked late, piecing together an airtight follow-up story for the national news. Ethan paced the paddock, Thunder at his side, while his mother kept watch from the porch. Near midnight, the silence was shattered by the roar of engines. Lights swept across the property as two trucks pulled into the driveway, their headlights blazing. Ethan's heart sank as Harper stepped out, flanked by 4 men, their faces shadowed but unmistakably menacing. "Enough games, Ethan," Harper called out, his voice echoing in the stillness. "Hand over the evidence, or I promise you'll regret it." Ethan stepped forward, gripping Thunder's lead rope tightly. "It's over, Harper. Everyone knows the truth now. You can't intimidate your way out of this." Harper laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think a bunch of angry social media posts will stop me? You're just a kid playing hero." Carter emerged from the barn, his cane in hand. "And you're a man running out of time, Harper. The sheriff's on his way." Harper's smile faltered, but he didn't back down. He motioned to his men, and they advanced. "Let's see how brave you are when we're done here." The standoff seemed to stretch forever until the sharp wail of sirens cut through the air. Harper froze, his expression darkening as red and blue lights appeared down the road. Sheriff Holden's patrol cars screeched to a halt, officers jumping out with flashlights and drawn weapons. "Harper!" Holden's voice boomed. "Step away from the property, now." For a moment, Harper seemed to consider resisting, but the odds were no longer in his favor. With a sneer, he raised his hands in mock surrender. "This isn't over," he muttered, as the officers cuffed him. As Harper's men were rounded up, Holden approached Ethan, his expression equal parts relief and admiration. "You did good, son. You gave us everything we needed to finally bring him down." Ethan felt the weight of weeks of fear and tension lift. "I couldn't have done it without Carter and Chloe," he said, glancing at his allies, who nodded in agreement. The next few days were a whirlwind. Harper's arrest made headlines, and Chloe's story gained national attention. Former employees of Redwood Stables came forward with additional evidence, solidifying the case against him. But for Ethan, the victory wasn't in the headlines. It was in the quiet moments on the farm, watching Thunder graze peacefully, finally free from the shadows of his past. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Carter joined Ethan by the paddock. "You know, kid," Carter said, leaning on his cane, "you didn't just save this horse. You gave him a new life, and in a way, he gave you one too." Ethan smiled, running a hand down Thunder's glossy coat. "Yeah, he did. We've both come a long way." As they stood there, Maria joined them, holding the old photo of Ethan's father and Thunder, or Storm Chaser, as he'd once been known. "He'd be proud of you, Ethan," Maria said softly. "I know I am." Ethan looked at the photo, then at Thunder, who nuzzled him gently. "This isn't the end, you know," Ethan said. "There's still more we can do, more animals we can help." Carter chuckled. You've got the heart for it, that's for sure. As the stars blinked into the night sky, Ethan made a silent promise to honor his father's legacy, to protect Thunder, and to keep fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Because sometimes, even the smallest acts of courage could change everything. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a boy and his horse. Ethan and Thunder's story reminds us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope and determination can lead to extraordinary change. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales that celebrate the connection between humans and animals. Together, we can shine a light on stories that matter and help make a difference in the lives of countless animals and the people who care for them. Stay tuned for our next adventure. You won't want to miss it. See you next time.